In this video, I'm going to teach you the lessons that I learned when helping other game developers make their games as quickly as possible. And before I begin, I just want to say this is probably going to be a very weird video because a couple months ago, I started doing a consultation call service where you could directly book with me so that I can review your game design. Here, I would try to improve your game design, improve your game's appeal, fix your gameplay mechanics, but most importantly, do a roadmap, which is the itemization of every single task you need in order to launch your game within 90 days or less. And why do you want to listen to me? I have a bunch of reasons why, but I think the only one that matters is, hey, I made a game called Dodge King within 90 days. I launched that commercially, and then I made Dodge King Deluxe in 90 days again, launched that commercially as well, and I've been helping developers with their process as much as possible. All right. What I do want to point out is that there's a lot of overlapping issues that a lot of developers in these consultation calls tend to have. And so I just want to use this video to address what those are so that if you were ever considering, hey, like what are things I should be aware of as a developer, these are the primary lessons you need to pay attention to. The first one has to be the definition of your game. And so you can come into a call and we can, spend an hour or even two just talking about how wonderful your game idea is. And I just absolutely love listening to every single person's idea, how creative they can truly be. But one of the biggest issues that we have in the development area is we don't know how to define objectives very clearly or precisely, right? You come to me with an idea and you say, "Oh, I want my game to have this. I want it to be like that, but then I also want to do this." And so it's great. And again, you want to continue using that creativity no matter what. But the issue is that if you can't condense your entire idea into one word, or at least bare minimum a couple of words that creates a phrase, I can't help you define what your game is going to be, and then as a result, I can't tell you how to design your game, right? So the first exercise that we normally do is we try to do everything possible to condense what the gameplay loop of your game is, what is the main mechanic, what is your objective? Why are you making this game? What is the purpose of the player? Like, what are they supposed to feel when they're playing the game? And so you'll see this on the screen here. But for example, Dodge King is about dodging. Dodge King Deluxe is about precise movement. The other game I'm working on is about aiming. And again, I can put more examples here. But the idea is, once you have that concrete definition of what your game's going to be about, suddenly designing it becomes ridiculously easy because every single system, every single mechanic, every single gameplay loop, every single enemy, how the enemies look like, how the bosses show up, the systems, the upgrades, the rarities, how you get attack damage, literally every single component of the game must respect that objective. If it fails to do that, your game is going to be incoherent, and more importantly, it's going to be more difficult to design. And remember, every time you have friction in your game development process, that's just going to be more time it takes to actually get over it. So the first thing that I always do with the developers that I talk to is, hey, let's talk about your game. What is your game about? And if you don't know that, we do a brainstorming session where we just kind of like talk a lot until we kind of find that core, condense it, and then use that to build our gameplay loop. The second thing is when I ask you, how are you planning your game, right? Like if I said, hey, do you have, let's say you want to make your game in a year, for example, right? What does the timeline look like? But more importantly, how are you preparing the timeline? And so a lot of developers typically would say, oh, I have a prototype phase. I'm just going to put a couple of mechanics. I'm going to do some play testing. After that, I'll go ahead and push it into beta, make more content, and then launch it, right? And yeah, you can have a generic iterative approach. I don't think that's a bad choice. If anything, like that's how a lot of games are made, right? But the point that I'm trying to address is that road mapping, and road mapping might be a skill at this point, but road mapping is the item. It's the what it is it's itemizing every single task you need in order to make your game possible to launch, right? And it's a very meticulous process because you have to break it down from the prototype phase, the beta phase, the playtesting phase, how to polish. You want to make sure that you have all your dependencies early. Then you want to make sure that you like spend a good portion like making the content and like the enemies, the graphics, the artwork and everything. But you want to make sure you have time to test. Like it's a very again, it's a meticulous process, right? But the point is when we break it down into these sections where you again, it's like item number one, item number two, you want to do this, then three, then four, then 100, then 200, then step number 500. When you have it down to like a literal checkbox of like what you need to do, you can clearly see what are the things you need to do, and then as you build your game following that checklist, your game just gets built. And the reason why the roadmap is honestly one of the most powerful tools in game dev right now is simply because it gives you a concrete vision of what you need to do to actually launch your game. And so anything that you do outside of the roadmap is an overscoped feature or is simply something that is distracting you from getting it at a commercial release. And so what's interesting is when we do this, one like when we talk about like, what is your objective of your game, what are the ideas that you want, what are the mechanics, this and that, we break it down in these phases. Again, prototyping first, then beta, then content, then polishing. Like there's a lot of like there's a sequence to it, and the sequence might be boring too because you might stick with the prototype a little longer than you want to. You might be debugging things for like a whole month and such. But the whole point is once you literally do that step by step by step by step, you'll have the game playable and then you can launch it. There's going to be certain parts where you need to give it a little bit of space for players to insert their opinions, again, get their feedback, implement those player feedback suggestions and such, and that's part of the process. But once you have, again, the step by step blueprint of how to make your own game, you can it's just a matter of focusing on that blueprint before anything else. All right. Being said, another issue that I would argue 9 out of 10 developers have is that they work on the wrong features. And so let me be very clear when I say this, okay? Your game idea could be super unique. It could borrow a bunch of mechanics from some other games. It's your choice. You're the director of your own game. You're the one that's going to build whatever you want to build. All I'm saying is that if you can build features that make your game more coherent with your game's objective, it'll more likely be a useful feature than one that doesn't work. So, for example, let's say you're making Super Mario, right? Basic platformer, jumping, you got some enemies, level progression, maybe a boss or two, basic stuff. Okay. If you said, yeah, imagine Super Mario, right? A platformer, but it's once you save Princess Peach, it becomes a dating sim. You get to raise her up and everything. Okay, cool, right? If that's what you want to do, go for it. But my question to you, or what I try to press my developers on, is that feature gonna be cohesive with the main objective of the game? If the main objective of Super Mario is jumping, where literally everything is about jumping, and when you really break it down and think about it, every possible mechanic, every enemy gets defeated by jumping, every unlockable power up gets unlocked every time you jump, is a dating sim gonna help the game become more cohesive? And the answer is gonna be no, right? If you want to do a platform that's a dating sim, that's up to you. Go for it, and let me know if that works because I think that'd be very interesting to see. But the idea is that dating sim would have to have a lot of jumping mechanics, and if you don't have that, then it's not going to be a useful feature at the end of the day. So what I like to say is ask yourself: is the feature that you're making, is it helping the main mechanic? Is it helping the gameplay loop or game experience? Meaning, okay, yeah, this is a sound effect, for example, but I want to make sure that the sound effect is a retro sounding sound effect because our game is going to be 8-bit and it has to like correlate that. Okay, that's sure. But is it going to be like a very fancy orchestrated soundtrack and you have like 8-bit stuff? Maybe that's not as cohesive. Um, is your feature going to support the game's objective? If it doesn't do this, you're overscoping. You don't need it. Save that idea, put in a different document, and visit it later when you make your second game, your third game, your fourth game. Because there's always a lot of great ideas that I hear, but I keep saying these ideas would be 10 times better and more. It would be executed at a more efficient way if it were more cohesive with the game's objective. If it doesn't support the gameplay loop at the moment, put it aside, don't focus on it. If it does directly support the gameplay loop, okay, then yeah, it would be a natural inclusion to just go ahead and add it onto the list of items that you have to make. All right. So just be very wary about what you need and what you don't need. The second part of this conversation that I want to talk about real quick is there's a lot of personal vices that we have as developers that keep us away from actually like building our games, right? One thing that I talk about super often is, how to manage time, how to make time, how to be more efficient as a person so that you can translate that skill into other disciplines. My channel talks about game dev, but you can also put it into like any type of other business or other practical use of your time, right? And so one of the biggest issues that a lot of developers have, I'm not calling out anybody, and I used to be very guilty of this myself. So, like, this is an honest conversation that I'm trying to have here, but we all tend to fall for vices. We could be doom scrolling on social media. We could be consuming things that we're not supposed to be watching, such as pornography. Maybe we have a group of friends that we're always playing video games with at night, and sometimes we're doing 6-hour sessions on the Gulagog, right? Like whatever. Like all these cool things happen, but we got to find a way to like break out of it, and more importantly, recognize, is this hobby activity, is this thing that I'm doing, is it actually productive? Is it helpful? Is it taking time away from me to make my game, to be more productive on the things that I want to do? If so, I should probably get rid of these things. And so the problem is, it's about instant gratification. It's about how do we remove addiction? It's about how do we deal with a world where, like we're always constantly on our phones, right? Like these things are real issues that we have to like fight with and struggle with. And so I would honestly sit down and just have a conversation with you to talk about like, hey, like, what are things that are actually distracting you? Are you building habits or routines that are getting you away from that? Are you disabling access from these things? Are you making a conscious decision to, recognize, oh wait, I'm I just realized I'm doom scrolling, I should probably stop. Hey, let me go ahead and remove the app for a bit. Oh, let me put an alarm just to, like, respect my time. Please recognize that. And by the way, yeah, I know YouTube is technically a thing we're consuming. I know you're watching this video. Just give me a little bit more time here. But the whole point is, like, we will continuously consume things unconsciously to the point where it's just like taking too much of our time. Stop consuming the wrong things, or like at least like be aware of what you're consuming, and then take a step back and realize, okay, let me go back to focusing on what I need to do. And remember, focus isn't a skill. Focus is simply getting rid of your distractions, right? Being said, kind of like a second layer to this topic is, a lot of us are privileged and a lot of us are blessed depending on the type of life position we're currently in, right? Many of us have privileges and advantages while others simply just don't have that, right? And we have to be empathetic about that. But you also have to recognize that nothing is an excuse to stop you from being productive. Let me explain. I've met a bunch of very talented developers who are parents. They're taking care of children, they're taking care of their spouses, they have multiple jobs, and they literally would only have 1, maybe 2 hours per day to possibly, relax, be on their phone, watch some Netflix, go on TV, right? And so, in these conversations that we have when we're developing the design process of what you need to add to your game, what mechanics you got to focus on, what are the tasks you have to work on, we always come down to that point where it's like, okay, you have 2 hours of the day. Could you do these tasks within an hour, 2 hours? Could it take multiple days, but can you get this part done? And you'll hear the parent, you'll hear the most busy person say, yeah, I can do it. And there's individuals that they will have a huge workload. They would have a huge responsibility in their personal life, and they will still have the time to make the game. Okay. On the other hand of the spectrum, you can have an individual who has, maybe he's single, maybe he doesn't have a job, maybe he just graduated, maybe, he relies on his parents and they're comfortable with that. And they're like, yeah, you have a whole year before we kick you out of the house, right? Like, you have all the time in the world to do anything. And so, yeah, that individual probably has way more leverage making games because now they're more productive, this and that. But at the same time, they can have vices that can, like, push them away from being productive. Being said, whether you're the parent that has no time, or whether you're that one dude that has like all the time in the world and you want to take game dev seriously and everything, your life position matters because it helps you leverage more time, more productivity, but it's not an excuse to stop you from being productive. Okay, so just please recognize that in any situation that you're currently in, provided that you get rid of your vices and your distractions, you will always have at least an opportunity to use that free time to build something that's productive for you. So again, don't use this as an excuse to say, well, I'm too busy, I'm not going to do it. No, no, no. You will always have opportunities to make time. Don't forget that. Okay. And I've talked to many developers that are parents, by the way, and they are absolutely killing it. They're absolutely making insane progress. And I honestly, like, a shout outs to all the parent developers here who genuinely can like continue just making games as quickly as possible, simply because they know how to get rid of distractions, they know how to manage their time, and despite everything that they're dealing with, they can still make the game. If they can do it, you can too. Speaking of getting rid of your distractions and your life positions and everything, one thing that I commonly tell developers is, or one goal that we always aim for is, hey, can you make your game within 90 days? And that has to sound really intimidating. 90 days to make a game, bro. Like, I can be working on the same mechanic for 2 weeks and I want to, like, give up, right? Like, it's like, what? That's kind of insane. But when I'm talking to these developers, 90 days, it sounds like an impossible challenge because it's like that's so little time. But then I propose this really interesting hypothetical. I say, hey, check this out. Let's say I got rid of your internet. Let's say I got rid of your phone. Let's say I got rid of all your friends. Let's say I got rid of your job. Let's say I got rid of your family. Let's say I got rid of everything possible. And the only thing you're a robot now, by the way. The only thing you can do is look at your computer, and for 24 hours, for 90 days, you can only work on your game. Do you think you can build your entire game world the way that you see it? In that scenario, that's extreme. And it's also a theoretical because I'm not going to take away your family. Okay. But turns out, yeah, you can make a game in 90 days. Now, the reason why I present this exercise is because you realize, okay, if I can build more time to focus on my tasks, then yeah, anything's possible within 90 days, okay? So you can always shorten the horizon of how long it takes to do a project by seeing your opportunities and cutting your distractions. Again, I know I'm repeating myself a lot for these past 5 minutes, but I just really need to drill in your head. Distractions are the number one thing that will take your focus away from any endeavor that you end up going for. And so the reason why I say, can you make your game without internet, is simply just to say, Can you make your game without any distractions? You don't go out. You're kind of like a hermit. I don't recommend hermit mode, but it works sometimes, So like these are things that I want you to keep into consideration. All right. Then another question I asked, and this is very hilarious in retrospect, but do you have a calendar? No? Or yeah? Like, do you actually have a calendar? Okay. It doesn't matter if you have a calendar or not. I mean, you should have a calendar, but it's not about if you have the calendar or not. It's if you do have a calendar, do you respect it? Okay. When I say, hey, I blocked out this time because in this hour, I'm going to go ahead and focus on this mechanic, right? Does that mean when you go on Unity, Unreal, Godot, when you're coding that mechanic that you said for that hour, in that hour, are you actually scripting, programming, going back and forth? Or are you spending 10 minutes writing the code and you're like, oh, let me let me get my phone. Let me just like hold on. Let me get this message real quick. Oh yeah, okay. Okay, yeah, let me go back to coding. Okay, boom. Every time you jump from one task to another, that's a loss of production. That's a loss of energy. That's a loss of that you lose so much more than you think just by like jumping through tasks. And the reason why this happens is because, maybe we want that instant gratification, maybe we're bored. There's a lot of reasons for this, right? But what I tend to notice is developers that focus more on blocking out sessions of time, but absolutely focusing on what is supposed to be accomplished within that hour or again that blocked session, those are the developers that are going to end up making the most amount of progress. Okay. So going back to the habits, going back to the routines, going back to getting rid of distractions, you genuinely want to make sure that if you have something on your calendar, you respect it for what it is. And this is also what we know as Parkinson's law. I talk about this almost in every other video on my channel. Parkinson's law is so important. If I told you, hey, you have a homework assignment for Friday, okay, you are probably, and it's Monday, right? You're probably not going to do anything on Monday, probably nothing on Tuesday. Maybe Wednesday, you take a look at like, oh, what was the assignment again? Okay, this and that. Then Wednesday night, you start a little bit. Thursday night, you do the entire assignment. And then Friday, you go to class, you turn it in, you're done with the homework, okay? And so what's interesting about that, and the same scenario goes for work, right? Hey, you have to get to work at 8 a.m. Okay, let me set my alarm for 6 a.m. I wake up. Okay, now I have 2 hours to do everything possible to get to work. That means I got to shower, I got to eat, I got to walk my dog, I got to prepare my meal, I got to go ahead and drive the car, I got to get to the office, I got to make sure I go. Like all of these tasks that you have to do within that time limit will be accomplished if you respect the urgency of the time limit. If it means going to work on time, if it means turning in the assignment on time, these things will push you to like finish on time. And so the funny part about the 90-day game dev thing is when you self-impose that pressure for yourself, you will be able to finish the tasks that you said you would do. The interesting thing is it becomes more real when you have external pressure. So when I'm around, right, when I'm talking to these developers, I'm like, okay, you have 2 weeks to get this part done, okay? And in 2 weeks, I'm gonna go ahead and call you, and you're gonna show me your stuff, right? And then what you'll quickly realize, and this is something that's really funny. I've had many developers where maybe 2 to 3 days before the actual like call of like checking in on the assignment, I'll get a message from them saying, "Hey, like I'm almost done, but like I don't know if I'm gonna make it." And then maybe I'm a bully, maybe I'm kind of mean, but I'm like, "Oh, okay, too bad. You got to finish it. Like you have to hurry up." And that pressure exists, right? I do believe, there's a quote that says, "Diamonds are made out of pressure," right? So it's like if you really want to like push for something, use Parkinson's law. If you need an external push for that, then yeah, you want accountability, you want other people pressuring you, you want those deadlines to be as real as possible. Okay, and so one thing real quick in the slide that I'm saying, you'll quickly see that as a human, you're going to be busy with so many things in life. But once Parkinson's law kicks in, once you recognize the fear of like not of missing that deadline, suddenly everything that was super making you busy and everything just gets condensed into, oh no, we got to lock in, we got to like hurry up, we got to do everything possible to make this happen. And by the way, this is also where all-nighters come in all the time, by the way. So just a heads up. All right. Now, last 3 points. I'm going to conclude this video super quickly, but another thing that I noticed about a lot of developers is, most of us are indie, right? And a lot of us probably have some formal background of like education of game design. Some of us did it for fun. Some of us did it for the interest of it. Some of us want to pivot into a more commercial place. There's a lot of reasons and approaches to how developers actually, started their development journey. But one thing that I quickly noticed is that we need to really have a solid foundation of what game design fundamentals look like. And the crazy part is I'm not going to ask you to know every single design fundamental in game design, right? but I'm only going to ask you to recognize what is your mechanic, what is your risk reward, what is your depth, what is your feedback, and what is your gameplay loop. Basically, everything that you see here on this screen. I give you a quick rundown if you don't know that, but long story short, the reason why this is so important is because mechanics are what's going to be one of like 90% of the focus of your game. Feedback is how your game feels, and then there's other things that you have to pay attention to, such as appeal. Why would you play your game? Why is it interesting? Like, what are the color choices? Like, there's a lot of like other things that are more in the polishing phase that you want to focus on. But the most important thing is to really establish your mechanic, your feedback, and the gameplay loop, which is how do you go from one sequence to another? How do you keep the player engaged? What are you constantly doing that you're feeding the player the ability to keep playing your game over and over and over? And so if I'm talking to you and I'm like, hey, can you precisely describe what risk and reward uh, tasks you're adding onto your game? Is that going to work? Do you know what mechanics you're making? Do you know what type of feedback your game needs? These are like the definitions I would ask you to like learn. And even if you have no idea about like game design, these are literally the only fun foundations that I would genuinely ask you to learn. Learn more about what makes a good mechanic. Learn more about what makes a good feedback. Learn what makes a good depth. Learn about the risk reward mechanic, and learn about like gameplay loops, basic gameplay loop stuff. I have a couple of videos already discussing these, and I have future videos that will discuss more of these soon. So if you haven't already, I would genuinely recommend you subscribing to this channel so that you can see more of this later. Last thing, or second to last thing, is developers have a huge lack of social support. And what I mean by this is I'll have a conversation with a developer and I'll quickly notice that they pretty much know a lot of what they're doing is correct. They just need like some type of validation or a little bit more guidance or clearance of like what direction they should take in order to make sure that yeah, maybe you're going to be using your time correctly, or hey, I would avoid doing this, you should probably do that. And so what's interesting is if you have a friend who is already a game developer or someone that you can reach out to that is already a good developer, and I would recommend someone that has like some level of credibility, perhaps someone that has already launched the game, or just someone that has the ability to say, "Oh, I recognize this is a good idea or a bad idea." Please have more proactive conversations with them, because just by you sharing your idea and getting a feedback and trying to like understand what's going on, having that proactive conversation allows you to see where your blind spots are within your game design. And this is very interesting because I myself, I have a bunch of mentors. I'm always talking to game developers. I'm always seeing how they do their approaches. I'm always sharing ideas. And there's a lot of cool nitpick ideas that you get when you're talking to these developers. Sometimes you'll say, hey, like, I'm going for this mechanic. What do you think? Oh, it would be cool if you did that. Hey, I like what you did, but have you considered this? Oh, maybe you shouldn't do that. That's not a bad idea because it conflicts with this other thing that you mentioned before. Hey, I like this character, but it doesn't make sense when you put it next to this. Having conversations with developers, again, that have some level of credentials, one of the best things you can do. And so one thing that I learned while doing these consultation calls is I, and I'm not trying to say this in like a weird way, but I could recognize that, like my experience and background can help you. And I was helping other developers with this process because they directly said, hey, thank you for allowing me to, talk about it, and I can see the blind spots and such. But then I also realized in my case, when I was talking to a bunch of developers, which I am still doing that today, I'm always seeing which blind spots I have. So always try to talk to developers when given the opportunity. Last thing I'm going to say here is we're aiming for perfectionism, and that is absolutely wrong. Make one game, then work on another, then work on another game. The more you iterate per game, the better the game is going to be. That's always going to be true. That's always going to be super good because you're learning what makes a feature good. You're learning what makes engagement good. You're learning what makes the player actually have fun. You're doing so many efforts of like if you can make a really good game that's super small, your skill to making a bigger, better game just depends on like how well you did that first game. And so every time you iterate from one game to another, you're quickly learning, oh, yeah, they're two completely different games. They all have completely different features. But I learned that, my mechanics needed these risks and rewards. I learned that these were the feedback loops I needed. Oh, I learned that this is the one thing that I did to make it better. Oh, this is what I learned from playtesting. Oh, this is what I learned from marketing. This is what I learned from launching a page. Everything is just going to naturally get you more skills and experience when making more games. So the dream game that you actually want to do is something you should leave later and you should just keep focusing on. Not small games, but just games that allow you to learn how to do the entire production process as a whole. I always say if you want the Breath of the Wild, you need to start with the laws. And so, and it's true, we would never have Breath of the Wild if we never had The Legend of Zelda from 1990 something, right? So always make sure that you start kind of small And I don't want to use the word small because I don't really like that because it's like, oh, it's small. Like, no, you can dream big. You can do whatever you want, right? But realistically, you want to have something that you can produce and reproduce that over and over and over again, just adding and iterating and keep building more and more. And again, we're doing this per game. More games you build, the better. And so, again, you cannot make your dream game. You cannot make this peak AAA super fun game and everything if you cannot understand the foundations of something that works. All right. Being said, thank you for watching this video. I know this was a little bit lengthy and such, but if you were ever interested in behind the scenes or just like extra stuff about the channel, what's happening, I have a newsletter. You can go ahead and sign up for that. You can subscribe to the channel. You can like, you can look at the other videos. If you actually want to do a consultation call, you can go ahead and book one too. I'm actually trying to prepare a course at the moment where every single process that I do in these consultation calls, I condense it into like a course with all of these extra resources and such. So that is something that I would actively, more proactively talk about in the near future and such. But being said, go ahead and check the link in the description down below if there's anything else that interests you. All the games that we're working on is also wishlistable on the link down below. And yeah, once again, thank you for listening. And again, I very much appreciate you for your time here. So be productive. Try to get out of YouTube now and have fun. All right.